Welcome to episode 2 of Behind the Screen, where I'm going to teach you how to make successful characters for your game. Alright, so we've got our materials now, we've got all that stuff ready to go. We've got our screen, we've got our dice, we've got everything, we're ready to start rolling. But first we need to decide two things, and that's the characters, which is a very, very important part, obviously. And another thing I neglected to mention in the first video, your world. Now, while most DMs decide to put their game in a generic fantasy world like Greyhawk, you can also go out of your way to try something different. Take, for example, my favorite campaign setting that is going to be released in 4th edition shortly, Eberron. I love this campaign setting. It's got a more dark, steampunky feel to it, and it's just awesome. Now, a lot of people like to use Forgotten Realms or anything like that, even Planescape or Spelljammer if you wanted to. But I think you should definitely decide on a world before you start making anything like that. The next thing your players need to know before you actually start playing is the tone of the game. Now, D&D is a really varied game. It can be anywhere from comedic door crashing to an epic fantasy scale to a really dark horror story. And you might want to decide what you want to do before you start making characters for it. Just because players can get confused and make a kind of cartoony character if you're going for something realistic, or they can make something, say, they can make a Warforged in a game that has no technology whatsoever. Now let's talk about sheets. Now, okay, take your D&D character sheets that came with the game, the ones that you photocopy right at the back of the player's handbook. Take them and throw them away. They're atrocious. Instead, there's plenty of 4th edition homebrew sheets out there that are absolutely awesome and are much better than that piece of fucking garbage. So, the one I use is Shado's 4th edition character sheet. Now, I'm going to put a link up here to where you can download them. I think I pointed the right way. To where you can actually download these sheets, and I think they're going to be perfect for your game as they're perfect for mine. Now, as you have noticed with this sheet, this is in color. Now, one thing that I advise you is to not make a lot of these. Ink costs money, and a lot of it. And as we all know, printers drain ink really, really fast, and these things are full of color, and for not really much of a reason. You don't really need it. So, actually, go make one of these, go to somebody's house, or print them off if you have to. Print off one set of these sheets. Print off one of the front sheet, one of the middle sheet, one of the power sheet, and one of the ritual sheet, and just go photocopy them. Go to Kinko's or Shoppers or Staples or whatever, and go find somewhere with a photocopier and photocopy them. It's much cheaper, and you can even do it in color if you wanted to. Alright, now into the meaty stuff, the character creation. One thing that you need to do is inform your players. This is really important. Like I said before, with your tone, the players need to know what they're getting into. So tell them your tone, tell them your world, let everything sink in a few days before you actually make the characters. Now, another thing I can't stress enough is have your players make the characters when you're there. Because unless a player already has their character concept completely done before you make them, it's very good to have GM input when they're actually making the character. One thing I always have my players do is have a concept. Now, this is something I lifted from World of Darkness, and it's a really ingenious thing. It's just a few words, like 4 or 5 words that just describe what your character is. Now, in D&D, a lot of times that can just be your class and your race, like, say, Half-Elf Paladin, or, like, Dragonborn Sorcerer. But I find in order to have a real rounded character with a personality, you need to have that short little backstory of how they are, and that really helps. That's just some examples of these concepts. I've got a few character portraits I've done here, and I'll just let you know what they are. Here we've got Emerald the Eladrin Wizard, who I described as a smug wizard school dropout. We've got Raven, the Tiefling Warlock, who is the unmotivated goth girl. We have Lakura, who is the very hungry wilderness ranger. And speaking of that, that's something I find very important, is having a character portrait. Now, whether it's just a little drawing you did on a piece of paper or something, having anything is, you need something. I mean, it's really, really helpful to actually have a little picture of your character, no matter how banal they are. I mean, even if it's a little stick figure, it's still something. Now, another thing that a character needs is a backstory. I mean, I don't care if it's just your character was raised in X place and they moved to their house when they were X age and they got into an adventuring party and killed some dragons. Whatever. It's just, I mean, if you can have that, or you can have some huge sprawling backstory where, they travel the world and, they see all this stuff and they're, destined to become great, that's all cool, like, fine. as long as you have something. I can't stand when characters just kind of appear, and then you try talking about their backstory, and they say, "Oh, I'm a dwarf." Yeah, so don't do that. I'm not going to go through doing all the stats with you, because there's plenty of videos on how to do that, and there's plenty of tutorials everywhere, and you can just look in the book. It's no big deal. One thing I want to talk to you about is this new expertise thing. And that's one of the feats in the Player's Handbook 2 is considered broken. Now I'm going to put a link to the Wizards page where they have an actual giant thread about this if you want to read up on it. And I'm going to put it up here. I'm hoping to point the right side again. But the general gist of it is people are giving their players +1 at first level up to 15th, +2 at 15th to 30th, +3 at 30th, I believe. And basically to balance out this feat that's either banned or completely integrated in your system because it's a bit too good. Either way, you can read the thread, read all about it. It's up to you. Now, a very important thing about 4th edition is having all the roles for combat. Combat's a huge thing in 4th edition. It's made a much bigger deal than it is in 3rd edition, say. Now, there's 4 different roles. There's the controller, the striker, the leader, and the defender. Now, basically, if you want to have a really well-rounded party, you want to have each of these. Now, that's not to say you can't have a 3 or 2 person party in the game. That's fine. But I mean, controllers, they move stuff around and basically make the fight easier. Strikers do your damage. Leaders heal and do minor controllery things. And defenders are your tanks. They're your meat shields. You throw them in the way of the dragon. Now, like I said, you don't need all these, but they're really handy to have. I mean, you want to have balance to counter throwing at your party and all that. But I mean, it doesn't really matter that much, but, you know, do it if you can. If the players don't want to just fill these roles, that's perfectly fine. They can go ahead. But ultimately, you want to have these 4 roles. Another thing is make sure your party is not going to self-destruct. You don't want to have characters that have good alignments with characters with evil alignments. That's just bad. The same thing if you don't want to have a cleric of, say, Paylor and a cleric of Tiamat in the same party. You'll be in bad shape. Now, another thing a lot of DMs do is start the players off with some kind of random cliche that they know each other already, or that they start in a tavern and they're all recruited, or that they wake up in a dungeon all naked and they find a way out or something like that. Now, that happens a lot. Now, the cool thing to do is actually have a reason why your characters are together. Now, this is a story-based thing, so we'll get into it in the later videos, but it's just a cool thing to do, is have a little backstory of your characters. Now, I'm going to plug WotC here for a minute. There's a new set of miniatures out, and it's just Player's Handbook Heroes. Instead of doing what they're usually doing and throwing everything into the one set, they've separated the monsters in one set of sets, and the players in the other. Now, this is a better idea because you can just go out and buy whatever miniatures you want in the player's side as opposed to getting random monsters. Now, this makes a lot more sense to me, but there's only a few of them now, but they might suit your character, so you should go out and check them out if you're looking for a player miniature. But unfortunately, not all the bases are covered. There's still no female bard miniature, which really, really bugs me, because that's the character I'm playing in a new campaign right now, and I can't do anything about it. So hopefully they'll put out some form of female with a musical instrument that I can use, but until then, just check out the players' miniatures. They might have what you're looking for. And that's pretty much all for character creation. Just make sure you're with your players when you're making the characters and everything goes according to plan. Also, don't be afraid to veto characters. If something happens and you don't want the character in your party, like say if the character is a really chaotic tiefling warlock that likes to burn things down in a party full of paladins and clerics, then you might want to veto that. You have power of GM, so you can always tell the player to go to hell. And that's pretty much that for this week. So until next time, this has been DJ, and this has been Behind the Screen. Happy role playing.